Good day, everybody. This is Trey Johnson with Zap. We're going to get started in just a moment here. But before we do that, as people are joining, I wanted to go ahead and launch a poll to just learn a little bit more about why people are attending today. So as you're coming in, if you'll take the opportunity to answer the poll, that will certainly give us a good opportunity to understand a little bit more about why you're here today. But more importantly, it'll help us understand if we do need to follow up with you. So thank you very much for those that are already responding. We do have a full, getting fuller audience, which is fantastic. And we'll get started here in just a moment. Thanks. Okay, we'll give it just another 30 seconds with the poll for those that are just coming in. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity to join us today, but more importantly to answer this poll before we get started. Again, my name is Trey Johnson, and Timothy will get to talk to him in just a moment. But let's go ahead and finish out the polling. We'll close it out in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. So excellent. So Tim, we're looking at your screen. I know that you're going to drive the slides for us today. Folks, again, my name is Trey Johnson. I'm responsible for our Americas business unit here at Zap. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Timothy Percival. Timothy is a managing consultant out of our UK offices serving our EMEA customers. And we're really looking forward to talking to you, about your ERP, about the BI tools that you have available, and basically just bring forward a lot of the better and best practices that Tim and the team, our professional services organization, have learned over the years. And so we'd love to spend, several hours with you doing that, but we've condensed it down to a digestible amount of information today. So Tim, if you would advance the slide, we'll kind of get straight into it. So as many of you who have attended these webinars know, that we kind of doubled down or more on the webinars that we're doing to make sure that we kind of stay in touch with you, the community around Zap Data Hub. We very much missed the opportunity to be face-to-face with all of you, as I know all of us, kind of missed some things that have changed over the last 6 to 8 months. We are very much looking forward to being out amongst all of you as soon as is practical. With that said, thank you very much for joining us today. Tim, go ahead. If you are new to Zap as an organization, a couple of just key things to know about us. Our team, as is very obvious with me sitting in Florida and Tim sitting in the UK, is very much a global team. We do have the benefit of customers in over 45 countries, but with all of those global things that we do, we also have a healthy amount of staff in each one of the localities. And so what that ultimately means is if you're a customer or you're a partner or you're a prospective customer, there's people genuinely within your market to serve your needs. Go ahead, Tim. So from an agenda standpoint today, we're going to talk just a little bit about what Zap Data Hub is for those that are not familiar with it. Tim is going to do a lightning fast show and tell, if you will, around some 3 topical areas for tips, for analytics and BI with your ERP data. And we'll finish off with Q&A. And so at any point, please feel free to put in your questions into the Q&A panel for the GoToWebinar. We will monitor those, but most likely we will answer them at the very end. So Tim, go ahead and go to the next slide. Thanks. So when we talk about Zap Data Hub, really the picture is genuinely this easy. Zap Data Hub sits squarely in the middle between your ERP data, your other sources of data, and the analytic outcomes that you're trying to drive from those various sources of data. Zap Data Hub is highly complemented with out-of-the-box prepackaged analytical content, whether it be Zap Zone, Analytical Designer. We also have prepackaged content around Power BI, which I think Tim will talk to briefly today, as well as for Tableau. Go ahead, next, Tim. But as we really focus in today, you know, the big starting point is very much the core ERPs that we support. So we support Microsoft Dynamics in totality, both D365 in terms of the latest releases, but we also support legacy Microsoft Dynamics. So if you're sitting there on Dynamics AX, Dynamics NAV, or something else, you know, there's connectivity that we'll be able to talk to you today. And more importantly, if you're new to Zap and new to Zap Data Hub, you'll be able to experience firsthand. We also happen to have a number of customers that are running on either SAP Business One or SysPro, and we have a number of different Sage products that we support as well. Next. So with that said, I think what we'll do is we'll move beyond my voice and we'll hear from Tim. I'll be in the background and maybe commenting just a little as we go, but please join me in welcoming Timothy Percival. And Timothy, the floor is yours.
Trey, thank you very much for the warm welcome. And yes, it's going to be a great opportunity to share some of my experience and hand over to you guys some best practices I've picked up along the way. So if we start off with sort of how Zap fits in with your ERP, as you know, ERP data, it's incredibly complicated. You know, there's a lot going on there, and there's many things which you can really get lost in. You know, some ERP systems have, you know, upwards of, you know, 5,000–6,000 tables, and you know that's quite a daunting task to undertake, certainly with a blank piece of paper in front of you of, you know, how you're going to approach this project. So what we've done is created a set of solutions of templates which know your model, which know your ERP. They're built upon the systems that you are using, such as Trey highlighted, you know, Sage, work with D365, with SysPro, SAP, you know, a lot of things to plug into, which really gives you a good starting point to then customize and build out if you so wish. So one very interesting point, the number of meetings and sessions I've been in where we've asked the question, okay guys, what do you want from your data? And this can be a really daunting task of starting off with a blank piece of paper and you know, knowing even where to go with that. So the great thing about having this a bit of a springboard is, you know, there's some suggestions there. There's some ideas of where you can start off and then take your data further to really get to grips with your specific business. So, you know, the out-of-the-box model, you know, gets the conversation going and makes the path to analytics easier. Okay, so the interface around that will give you, you know, all the options for all of these different connectors. You know, these will either be direct connectors where you can plug into the data, such as Google Analytics, you know, HubSpot, API-based systems, you know, with cloud versions of your ERPs, with on-prem versions as well. These will have all of the additional metadata and all the templates and all the information to really get you started. But then if you also want to take a SQL source, which could be a very bespoke system, you know, or even an Excel worksheet, you can plug that in to create this holistic view of all of your business information. So here's a bit of an idea of a few of the things which Trey has mentioned. So we've got, you know, Dynamics, we've got the historic AX stuff, you know, Sage, different versions of the Sage ERPs, SysPro, SAP, and as we'll come on to shortly, the ZAP environment, it's not source specific, it's agnostic to whichever source you're pulling in, which means you can have combinations of these. You can take small parts of data from all your different systems and combine them together. They can either be concurrent systems where you have an ERP and a CRM, or it may be a historic ERP joining into your new ERP, which you are releasing. So just to show a quick look, also on the Microsoft App Store, we have a set of analytics which you can use with Power BI, which will plug into your ZAP data model. So you don't have to use necessarily the ZAP front end. It can plug perhaps into a Power BI installation that you've already got up and running. So you have the flexibility there, not only to look at ZAP as a reporting tool, but also as a data transformation layer to connect all the things together, both from the ERP, from the source, but also at the other end on the reporting side of things.
And Tim, probably the only thing that I would add with regard to, those Power BI analytics that are on a Microsoft App Source is these actually are downloadable by anybody that's got Power BI desktop. And what that ultimately means is you can download these analytics. It actually ships with sample data, so you can really get a flavor for how the analytics work and function before, going further down the path with trying to deliver an infrastructure to support your users.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Trey. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at the idea around managing multiple data sources, because many of us will be based on one key ERP. But if you plug your reporting tool directly into that, after a few reports you've got to build, you're probably going to be looking at trying to augment your data and adding in perhaps a different data source. So why would you want to do this? Well, you could augment your data to provide additional meaning. So it may be that you're adding, for example, if it's a financial set of data, you could be looking at adding hierarchies to your chart of accounts. If it's a customer orientated, say, CRM system, you could look at adding customer groupings, for example. And this will sort of bring us on to the idea about making it business usable. Making it relating to your business and not starting off with your ERP and taking it forward. Okay. So there will be the ability to generate more complex hierarchical reporting. In my experience, one thing that ERPs are very good at is saving all of your transactions and getting all your information with the right detail. They're not so good at giving you the opportunity to categorize some of these things. So, for example, if you want to look at, say, teams of salespeople, what sales managers, directors do they report to? That can be quite tough to fit into the framework of an ERP system, but is very, very vital to run a business based around teams. So this idea of creating a business-focused data model, we'll come on to this more later, but let's address your BI strategy, not as a technical IT implementation, but as a tool which will give you the ability to answer the questions that your business needs. That should be the key idea of transforming this data and augmenting it with additional data sets. And lastly, we've heard a lot about self-service. It can be a tough one to implement, especially if the people you're looking to build their own reports, maybe they're not technically minded. After all, they're building reports for the business. So how can we go about building user-friendly information through the use of adding in additional data sources? So these are a few ideas of why we would want to look at this. So what should we be aiming to create? Well, as I mentioned, a source agnostic data model. So what I mean by this, instead of taking your ERP data and saying, okay, this is the data I've got to work with, it's all about Dynamics 365. It's a Dynamics 365 model. Well, let's flip that on its head. Let's look at the output, what you're looking to achieve. You're looking to achieve a model that will help your business make decisions. It doesn't matter where that data comes from. It doesn't matter which source it comes from. As we can see at the bottom, we've got the ERP. It could be SQL, Excel. It can even come from data, data streams or APIs. So this, if we start thinking about it as a data model, then we can remove this idea that it's simply a layer on top of your ERP. We're embellishing this out and giving it more meaning. So another thing I'd like to introduce you to the idea of data authorities. So it's structuring the data in a way that you can group common ideas together. So ERPs will have, the idea of, say, business partners or customers or suppliers or, ideas a lot around that. But in essence, actually, we should be combining these together to create one single authority on what the definition of, say, your customer is. The customer types will be, consistent grouping methodologies, regardless of whether it's come from your ERP or from a secondary source. So we can have a look at creating these authorities on data, which can be a trusted source of the truth. And the key aim here is getting the data model aligned to the business. Whilst you want to work around terminology which you are using elsewhere, perhaps in your ERP, actually the data should represent how your business is structured. So if you have, as I mentioned, groupings of, say, sales managers or different teams which you work through, the reports should reflect those teams so you can hold your teams accountable so they can make the right decisions, as opposed to having a set of data which maybe doesn't gel, doesn't tessellate with actually the business questions that you need to answer. So this diagram at the bottom shows these sort of processes and the steps available to help you do this. So as I mentioned, if you plug your reports right at the end straight into your data source, you're not going to be able to have this flexibility to augment or transform this data. So what the ZAP world looks like is any of your ERPs, any of your sources there, put into a staging table. And or station tables. From this point on, it doesn't matter where the data come from. It could be coming from an online source. It can be coming from the cloud, from an on-prem place, from an Access database, from an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't matter by this point. It treats it all the same. Data is data. It's information. So even at this very early stage, we've removed the say the reliance on the ERP limits. Then from there, we get the ability to transform the data. So through adding calculations, from looking up information, from unioning, all the kind of typical transformation things to really get the data into the right shape for yourself. This is then boiled down to your warehouse. And this is really key because whilst in the ZAP world, we'll be putting it into the cube and giving you a multi-dimensional model which you can reference and query. The great thing about having the warehouse there as well, as you saw from the Power BI analytics, which can sit on top, we can even look at querying the warehouse and the SQL tables if needs be. So it's not just a case that it produces, the cubes. You also get the information behind it as well. And then
And Tim, I was just going to add, as you describe things as cube, I think what we're saying kind of universally is analysis services in all forms. For those that are familiar with the analysis services platform, both the traditional cubes that are delivered on SQL Server, as well as Azure analysis services and tabular models.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly right, Trey. So this sits on top of the the Microsoft BI stack. We're dealing with SQL Server, SSAS. So the processes are they're not going to be foreign. You can use the same language and the same terminology that you're used to. Absolutely. And then when we've got everything in the right shape, onto the reports, and we can look at building out some reports from there. So how do we do it? Well, we will look at adding data to the model. How do we add that data in? What's the process there? What are the steps? Aligning your model to business goals. So we're going to look at getting some additional data in to structure things that may correlate more with your business structure. we're going to look at data authorities, and then we're going to look at naming columns so that we can get things human readable in your model. So yeah, let's take a closer look. So this is the environment, the ZAP environment. And firstly, what I want to show you, as we mentioned, we have these solutions, these templates out of the box to really plug straight into your ERP. So I'm just going to show you one for the Dynamics 365 Finance and Ops. So this is an example of a model which has been deployed, and no transformations or customizations have been done for this model. And this is a very quick process to get to this stage because we've done all the hard work. So it's a case of deploying or installing essentially the model here, as one would sort of go through a wizard kind of installation process. So we can see here under the pipelines, these are all your different points of data. These are all your different tables. They include, any transformations which may come into here and get the data ready to be outputted to your cube, to your data model. So we've got, nearly 250 of these sort of out of the box. We can see, let's have a look at customers. This is one bit of information that will be heading into the cube. And we've got these steps all ready to understand all the transformations with like data being looked up from other sources, combined together. We have some calculations here to give you additional data and additional views of the data. And we have the ability to put these into steps to get this real data flow coming through. And only then it will be output after we have gone through these steps. Okay. So this has all been set up for you based upon your ERP, as we said, to really hit the ground running. So let's take a look at how to add in a data source. So here's one I made earlier, based around the Sage X3 data model. So this is straight out of the box as it stands. And what I'm going to show you is how to bring in a data source from an Excel spreadsheet, which will look at grouping your sales team into different teams, your salespeople into different teams. So this model, this cube, is based mostly around the Sage X3, but we have a couple of other spreadsheets already, and these augment the data further. And we'll go into those a little bit more in detail later. But what I'm first going to do is look at adding in an additional data source, a brand new one, into this model. And of course, by the fact we can add a data source, it can be from any of the sources. As though it was a brand new model, we can add in any of these as an additional source. So this is why I mentioned, let's make this thing source agnostic. Let's really think about the data that you need, not worrying about where it comes from. So I'm going to take it from the Excel workbook here and connect my data source to that. And because we're looking at this team grouping in this case, it's pretty static data. So there's no need necessarily to have it coming from like a live SQL database or anything, a bit more technically advanced, let's say. We don't even need to point to, a live file location. We can upload this information and then that'll be there. Of course, because it's a spreadsheet, we can always download it, update it as you will. But because it's slowly changing at best, there's no need to have a live connection, sort of a more live or dynamic source. Okay, so I'll bring this one in and I'll show you in a minute. So we can test that to make sure that's all connecting. I'll show you in a minute what the data looks like. It's a very simple table that we've made in Excel, which maps sales reps to their manager. And let's just show you this here. So we have the employee ID, and this is the ID that we're looking at already in your system. And then this is the manager that we want to group by. Of course, we can have, additional columns if needs be. Even, we could say which, region or which country they belong to. The world's your oyster on this one. So what I'll do is just finish up here, and this automates all the tasks of bringing in this data. And from here, what we will have is a pipeline. And as I mentioned in that diagram, by the time it comes to staging, it doesn't matter where it's come from. It's a bit of data that you can use. Okay. It's very powerful here as well. It looks at data in there and looks at whether there should be any relationships to the data you already have. So for example, if you have the employee ID, like we do here, it may well already create the relationship for us, joining onto employee IDs in the ERP already. So what I'm just going to do is open up the pipeline that's been generated from the sales manager mapping. So let's just search on the data source. Okay, so here we can see the sales manager mapping information is here. So we have exactly the same ability to add in other steps as we saw in that D365 model. It's exactly the same view. So it doesn't matter where it comes from. And here we'll see the table with our employee and the manager and a few timestamps to handle some of the incremental loading. So what I want to do is bring this into not the cube directly. We're not going to put this sales manager mapping data source into the cube, because remember I said we're looking at creating data authorities. We're looking at creating a one dimension or one place where everything to do with sales reps can be stored all in one place. So instead of having the ability to, instead of having duplicate groupings where you say, okay, this is about sales reps and this other place is about their managers and this other place is about their region, let's put them all in the same place so that we can have this authority. So if you're a self-service customer, user, or you're maybe a non-technical technical user, then you'll know exactly where to look for all information about sales reps. You don't need to go off to different places to find the data from multiple areas. All the hard work can be done in this transformation layer, and then you'll get this clean output. So I'm going to turn it off from being a dimension in the cube itself. But because we brought it in, it's a table, it's in the staging, and can be in the warehouse so that you can use that data. Okay. So I'll just save this pipeline directly. And what I'll show you is how we can bring this into the sales rep tables, because that's really where we want our data to be. Okay, so we can see here this sales rep table, and this is coming from X3. But as I said, it doesn't matter where the data comes from. Once it's in staging, you can join it all together. Okay, so let's link this up, or make sure it's already linked up. As I said, when it was bringing it in, the sales manager mapping, it knew that the employee fields mapped, and they were the same type of data, same information. So it created that relationship for us. And this can be really handy, certainly when you're bringing in, say, a bespoke SQL database that maybe you've built out, but there's no template here. It's your own in-house one. This makes the task so much quicker with getting that groundwork in place so you can start querying that data. Okay, so because we've got this relationship, it's now really easy to bring in the sales rep manager, and just bring this straight into the sales rep table. So our sales rep will have all of the information that we need about sales reps, including a manager. So I'm just going to add that in there, and we'll see that it will bring in the manager information based on that sales rep. What I'm going to do is one extra thing, and create a hierarchy between the manager and the sales rep. We have a one-to-many relationship here. So basically, one sales rep each sales rep only has one manager. And because of that, if we create this hierarchy, we can simplify how our reports look and make them a lot more user-friendly. If we've got this logical relationship between the manager and their sales rep, then we don't need to worry about putting both of those concepts onto a report. We can just put the hierarchy on, and exactly as you'd expect, your manager will drill down into the sales rep themselves. So it's really simple to create the hierarchy. We'll just do sales manager hierarchy, and I'm going to add those two levels, manager and employee. I'm going to save this, and what I'm going to do now is process the model so that this data will come through into the cube. Okay. So what we've done here, we've added in a brand new data source, We've added in a brand new pipeline for the sales managers, and now we're going to link them up so that we have this information in our cube. Okay. While that's processing, that'll take a minute or two. As I mentioned, this common chart of account mapping. So this is part of the solution for X3 and many of the other ERPs that concern themselves with the financials and the financial information. And this is a really cool bit of functionality that you have the ability to map your accounts, your individual accounts or nominal codes, to map them up to different classes, different categories, so that you can make the production of your financial reports so much quicker. Let me just show you how not to do it, and then I'll show you how to do it. So if we look at here, one I made earlier, this account report. So let's imagine this is half of your financials. This is like your balance sheet side of things. So if we go into the, this could be quite simple. Sure, it's only showing one measure. You can put on as many columns as you want. But this isn't too complex in itself. But what we've had to do here, because there's not necessarily any grouping or any chart of account hierarchy information in your ERP, and every system will do it differently, but they often don't have this true chart of account hierarchy. You maybe have sort of categories or reporting codes, but not multiple levels. It can end up that you need to specify each of these individual account codes so that you can then get a report which maybe shows only one half of your your financial statements, either the balance sheet or the P&L. You've got quite a manual exercise there. But with this common chart mapping, what we can actually do is generate a hierarchy similar to how we did with the sales manager, but more complex with multiple levels. And I'll just show you this now from scratch. We'll just load up the cube. And of course, we're dealing with GL, so we'll have a look at the actual amount from the GL tables. And then what I took on that other, this other report here, we were looking at the individual account codes. So we have the account codes here, but what we've also done is brought in this spreadsheet of the common chart of account mappings, which will give us this hierarchy. So this is really cool because instead of specifying all those individual accounts, you've got this grouping of either your P&L or your balance sheet. You can say, okay, I want to have this just for the balance sheet data. And then you can drill down for all the levels specified in the spreadsheet, all the way down to the individual accounts. So here we're looking at two different elements on this report, as opposed to you maybe get into tens or hundreds of different ones on a more complex report if we're considering things on an account basis. Okay, so this is one really poignant way of presenting this benefit of adding in and augmenting your data sets to give more value, something that aligns to how your business reports. Okay, so let's see if the cube is processed with our sales manager information. Okay, nearly there. Won't be one more minute. Okay. So because we have this whole balance sheet section, you'll see also in the accounts, you can look at them, just individually and say, okay, just give me my, my balance sheet stuff. And then you can break it down by account code. You can still use the individual codes. You're not limited in that respect, but because you've got this mapping between your balance sheet or your P&L to the account codes, which was taken from that spreadsheet, then you don't need to specify all the individual codes which create your balance sheet. Okay.
So Tim, forgive me for if I get out in front of you on this at all, but the additional data that you're bringing in, you've started with the ERP, you're bringing in data from other sources, in this case, a simple spreadsheet, but it could be something more complicated like a CRM application or something else that has other customer information in it that just gives greater flexibility from a reporting standpoint to report by different facets of the customer or different facets of a product or things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Trey. So that's a really good point. That especially if you're linking your ERP and your CRM information together, sort of in my experience of a few clients, that holy grail is understanding, you know, how much did this marketing activity or this source of customer where you got your customer from, how does that actually transfer into money? And if you've got the separation between your ERP of all your invoices and your CRM with maybe your, you know, your customer sources, you know, what channel they came through on, really hard to do. But if you get them, if you get your CRM plugged into this model as well, you know, link them up on a common ID, and then you've got that full customer journey all the way from inception, all the way through to, you know, any web page visits if you've got Google Analytics plugged in, all the way through to their orders, their invoices, you know, this whole web of information that you can get, which without this transformation and having multiple data sources plugged in can be really, really tricky to get those cohorts related. Yeah, that's right. Okay, right, so it looks like our model is processed. So let's take a look at the sales rep information now. So if we take a look at, say, sales orders, you know, what orders have our sales reps taken? So if we have a look at, say, the amount, and let's have a look at quantities as well. And then we'll see here. Apologies, I may have taken the wrong one there. Okay. Excuse me for one moment, apologies. I may need to process this again.
Tim, you know, it's always fun when you do things live, and so we all appreciate that you're doing this thing live for everybody. You know, I think that everybody certainly benefited from your prior example, and if this one is something you want to come back to a little bit later, I'm sure they'd be fine with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Absolutely. Fantastic. So we'll just kick that off processing. So let's take a look at this idea of data authorities. So for example, if we open up and take a look at our cube again, then one example taken from the ERP, we've got lots of ways of describing the information in here. So if we just take a look here, we've got the idea of business partners. We've got the idea of customers as well. So a business partner in this instance is either a customer or a supplier, but then you've got this customer information as well. So, you know, if you're maybe new to this or you're a bit unsure, where do you take this information from? You know, which is going to be your source of the truth? And you could, you know, make the decision of, okay, we're going to do X, Y, or Z. But if we've got these both in the cube, there's perhaps the problem or the possibility for these to go out of sync. You know, some people will be using one, some people will be using the others, and it's exactly the same information. So what I would recommend here is, you know, remove the business partner side of things from the cube, just look at the customers or your suppliers, and therefore what you would be doing is creating or generating customers to be an authority on this information. You know, customers is going to be the authority on everything relating to customers. Okay, so if I just show you here, if we take I think this one here, yeah, so you know, you've got your customer names there essentially, but you're going to be having exactly the same information if we look at the customer names coming from here. So it's all about getting the data in the right shape for how you want to report on it, instead of having every possible piece of data that you could put into the cube. You know, let's focus on it. You as data modelers, you have a certain amount of responsibility to say, you know, this is how I want the data to look like. This is how I want the data to be used. So you can dictate, okay, we're going to be looking at customers. We're not going to be looking at business partners. You have that authority. Okay. And another example around this, you'll see here, you know, we've got these customer groups dimension as well. You don't necessarily need to have the customer groups in here as a separate concept. If we put it into the customers dimension, we can remove that, really tidy it up, and then customers will be the authority on everything relating to customers. This is a bit of a basic example, but when you say get into maybe more your financial things, if you've got your account structure and you've got different chart of account hierarchies, or you've got different ways of grouping things, put them all together, because then anyone building this report will be able to look and say, okay, I need to go to the account section, and that's where everything to do with accounts is saved.
Excellent, Tim. Well, I know you got a lot of ground to cover, and I know you've got a handful more slides, so we might want to.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, perfect. So I'll just tidy these up and close these down. Okay, great. So a couple of tips here, and this sort of covering the ground we've already looked at. Design your data model for use by the business, not by IT. It can seem like a very technical exercise because you're dealing with the databases in the back end, but actually what you're trying to generate is a business-centric model. So yeah, don't put GUIDs into your cubes. Don't use underscores. You can use spaces, camel case, or capitalization. These are all quite sort of tech-orientated ways of handling information. But we need to make this easy to use. We need to make sure it's understandable and the data can be read easily. And then you'll get a much better user experience and much better adoption as well. Also, when looking at combining your data sources, you don't need to merge two entire data sources together. You don't need to merge together your entire CRM and your entire ERP system. That could build out this really, really big, quite complex and complicated model, which people perhaps wouldn't know how to use. As you saw when we brought in just one pipeline from a spreadsheet, you can do that with your CRM as well. You can bring in just one or two tables. And because your ERP has all the information about customers, you really only need to bring in your transactions from that you need from your other source. And this will lead us nicely on to the next, the next ideas of how we should develop your data model for success. So avoiding risks in your data projects. You have so much data available to yourself in your ERP. There's always a temptation to try and add everything, make your model be able to answer every single question. But we need to be a little bit careful around this because otherwise we may end up building something so big that you never release anything. And one recommendation I'd have here is instead of working horizontally, work vertically. So if, for example, you would say, horizontally, I want to produce a board pack and it needs to have everything in here, sales, purchasing, finance, all your manufacturing data to give that really top level. But what we've got to consider there is much of the data validation will be around, your sales data or your purchasing data or your finance. So if we're thinking horizontally here, you're going to have to validate, 5 different sets of data before you can produce one report. However, if you think vertically and you say, okay, I'm going to focus on purchasing first off, that's the key thing. That's what drives our business. You can validate one set of data here and produce, an entire suite of reports at multiple levels, all the way from, your top level board, all the way down to, how my individual agents performing, who's spending what, who's making what money. And this means that you'll be able to take this iterative approach, one vertical at a time. You're going to be able to see the benefits without having to release the entire model. So recommendation, approach your projects vertically, not horizontally. Okay. So when it comes to data validation, it can be a case of looking at the report and saying, whether it's right or wrong. But I would recommend dividing it into 2 different sections, 2 distinct things. There's 2 different actions that we need to handle here. The first one is, your data flow, your data level transactional validation, basically answering the question, is the data moving through the stages correctly? You know, have I got the right numbers, the right transactions coming through? Then there's the report design validation, which is a very, very different thing. This is, have I built the calculations correctly? Is the number I'm looking at what I think, showing what I think it's showing? You know, is the business logic there correct? So if we think about looking at your top level dashboard, you know, we've got this accounts receivable dial here, we've got 12 million. Now, if you're trying to validate that number, just looking at that one number, it's going to be tough to validate, especially if the data underneath it hasn't been validated itself. So what I'm going to show you now is a very quick way to validate out the values, as opposed to looking at those top levels and being, you know, wondering why they're matching or not, and then having a look into how these reports are designed to understand the business logic that is being applied. Okay, so let's take a look at a new report. So what we're going to do is try and get back to that 12 million figure. So it was an accounts receivable figure from your finance dashboard. So again, if we look at finances, and then we need to look at our accounts, and from here in the hierarchy, there's an accounts receivable category. So this has got all of these accounts under it, but we've got this mapping so we can deal with, you know, business logic here. And there was one last bit of information we need to get in here as well. Let me just check what the last filter is, and we can map that 12 back to the 15. So we're looking at the position as of May 2019. Okay, so let's get that date in here as well. Okay. Okay, right, apologies. Let's take it from validating this number. We can tie it back. There must be an extra filter in there. Okay, so what we'll probably see here, okay, we've got this number. We need to understand, you know, what makes it up, because you're not going to have that number in your ERP anywhere. So what can we do? Well, by the fact that we have this multi-dimensional cube, you can break it down whichever way you want. So you can break it down by accounts, and then you can look at it from, okay, well, all of these look correct, but actually this top number isn't. So what we can then do, okay, chuck that on here and say, well, I just want to, you know, look at one of the account codes. So this top level one, let's say, is not the correct one. And then we can easily break that down by month. And then we can see, okay, it's this figure in May, which looks a bit spurious. And then you can keep on diving down. Oh, well, actually, you know, all of these under 100K, why is this one 611? And we can keep on going down like this, always to the ending up at the point where we can then get down to this transactional view to say, well, that number's right, that one's right, that's the one that's wrong. So this exercise of data validation will be very different from validating whether the report has been built correctly. This is saying, is my information coming through in a technical manner? And this is a really worthy exercise to do first off. But as I mentioned, if you're dealing with this horizontally, you've got to do this 5-10 times over for each module, for each area. But if we're dealing with it vertically, you only need to do this once.
And Tim, I just simply might add, you know, what you have done and have shown, you know, is kind of staying within the ZAP user interface here. ZAP Data Hub is really the platform that's building out the data to the level of detail that we need to do the validation, regardless of what tool people use to visualize the data. And for those that maybe have missed it, you know, kind of up front, we have, you know, on par support for not only our own visualization, but for Power BI and for Tableau as well as other tools. So if you have other tools that you're just simply more comfortable with and interacting with the data, up to and including Excel, you can use those tools as a means of visualizing the information, but what you're ultimately doing through those tools is validating that your data platform is correct.
Yep, that's exactly right. And, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're not only building out this cube here, we're also building out these warehouse tables. So if you want to access this data in a tabular manner, you've not got to have a second system which can generate all that to potentially go out of sync or drift. You are generating a single version of the truth, which can be central and pivotal to all of your applications and tools you're already using. Yeah. Okay, so if we perhaps take a look and say, okay, well, we've validated the data. The data is now all correct behind the scenes. Well, how can we validate this? It's just one number. Well, really cool functionality. We can open up this chart with all of the filters from this dashboard applied to have a look at exactly how it's been built. And if we sort of go into the design mode here, we've got our accounts receivable calculation, which is what I also used. We've got the balance here, which was the function we were using here. And we've got this total to date function as well, which is probably where I went wrong with that 15 million. So we have this total to date function as well. So even though we're sort of looking at it combined as part of a bigger thing to give this bigger picture, you've got this flexibility to go all the way down to the report design to edit each individual cell. And the great thing about this, having this modular approach, is that you can use this cell on your CFO dashboard. You can also use it on your your salesperson dashboard or your your purchaser's dashboard, that kind of idea. So you don't need to keep on recreating the same information over and over again. So a couple of best practice tips off the back of this. The use of publication rules. So a publication rule is an automated email that you can send out with a report attached. And sometimes when you've got a brand new system, whether it's the ZAP reporting interface or maybe Power BI, that can be a little bit daunting to get involved in that and log in and see what all the options are, especially for quite a mature bit of software. But what we've got the ability to do is send out emails of the reports generated by the system. And this is fantastic because you can really sort of speed up your return on investment by getting users engaged from the start, emailing out reports to them. Then they will see the dashboards, they'll see what they look like without even needing to log in. This is really, really good for showing them the power of what you've built in your data model. Also, as we saw with the hierarchies and the way we can manipulate data, not only can you look at it at a top level, you can also look at the individual account levels below that as well. You can go down all the way to this transactional level. Okay. Also, as far as keeping this really simplified model and this simplified data set for your users, we also have the ability to apply security to different parts of this model. So you may be a finance report writer. If you're logging in, you might not want to see sales order, you might not want to see manufacturing. You've got all of the power here to add row-level security, which actually gets added to the cube itself. So whatever interface you're using to access this information, you can really be in control of who sees what, to give them the best experience, to generate the best adoption, and to make sure that report writing is actually a pleasure.
Excellent, excellent, Tim. Thank you very much. That was really good stuff. And so what we'll do is we'll actually share one final poll. And while we're doing that, I would highly encourage those of you that are attending that have questions to put them into the Q&A panel. While this polling slide is up, we might start to take a couple of those questions. One of the first questions is, what distinguishes this BI tool from other data warehouse BI tools like ClickSense, etc.? It's a really good question. There can be a really long and extended answer, but the short answer that we really like to provide is we have very smart connect.
I'll follow on from where Trey left off. Hopefully you can still hear me there. So yeah, what distinguishes from different BI tools? Yeah, we've got these smart connectors. So we have the ability to plug directly into your ERP. You don't need to take things from scratch every time you build a report or you don't need to take things from scratch as part of your, your data warehousing project. So with all the connectors, you're up and running, you can hit the ground running really quickly. Okay, I'll just check any other questions. Okay, so we've got a bit of a technical one come in here. We've got the question, how does this sort of compare to like SSIS? And I think that's a really fair point. We're not reinventing the wheel as far as sort of data transformation. We're just making it user friendly and making it so you've not got to roll your own information every time. So SSIS is a sort of a data flow package, a data flow tool where you can bring data in from different sources. The flexibility and the complexity around that is great. It's a very, very powerful tool, but because of that, it can be quite daunting. Even within 15 minutes or so on this session, we saw the ability to bring in extra data from multiple sources, and that's a very, very quick implementation, a quick process in order to bring that stuff in. And especially the graphical interface around adding this data in, whether it's in the warehouse stage or the cube stage, it's very similar in what, say, SSIS can achieve, but you don't need you don't need a degree in order to understand what it's trying to achieve.
Absolutely. It's a very excellent points there, Tim, and sorry for the lost audio momentarily. There are a couple other questions, that we will absolutely aspire to get answered for the individuals. One question is, when is Tabular going to be available for the data warehouse piece? That is absolutely something that is really in with some early adopters at the moment. So we expect for that to be kind of a mainstream release very soon here. For those of you that wouldn't quite know exactly what Tabular is, it's the evolution of analysis services from the traditional cube to more of an in-memory type of data model. Tabular is what is used underneath Power BI, and the ability for ZAP to actually publish directly to a tabular model means that we're just that much closer and that much more tightly integrated with not only Power BI, but the entire Azure data platform stack. So there are some other questions. The recording of the webinar will absolutely be sent out to folks. Looks like we got just a couple minutes here. One of the other questions was, can I transform multiple ERPs into one common model? Tim, I know you started to show that just a little bit, just about the nature of, kind of not necessarily conforming solely with D365 or solely with Sage or those sorts of things. I'll just say that it's a very common scenario that our customers that have moved to a new platform, say D365 F&O, but still want to preserve their legacy data, maybe it's GP, maybe it's NAV, maybe it's AX, that they have that ability to support both sets of data in the same model and report across the entire spectrum of the ERPs that they've been using. So they don't have to really solely look at it as F&O only data or AX only data or NAV only data, but rather they can look at it in totality.
Yeah, that's right, Trey. And I was just going to say that's this idea of having this sort of agnostic source that you're building out this data model, not plugging into an ERP. And because this is built on methodologies, SQL and tables and views and SSAS, any of the sort of concepts or solution architectures you could build out there, you can build also within ZAP as well, whether it's plugging in secondary ERPs into your main one, if it's actually having all of your ERPs on a similar level and then creating another layer. You've got the entire suite of solution architecture type tools to play with here.
Absolutely. One of the last questions, as I understand it, we publish versions of the model as we mature, but by adding data sources or entities from within the data sources. Is that correct? That's absolutely right. So Zap Data Hub is very much an incremental type of tool, meaning that, as Tim described, building out across functional areas, subject areas, if you will, you can continue to evolve and address the reporting requirements for a wide portion of your business as you cover off purchasing and sales and other supply chain elements and finance and the like. And so you really have the flexibility to incrementally release new capabilities within the model to your user base. And in doing so, what you're effectively doing is you're continuously delivering something out to the business versus many of you who've probably done data warehouse projects that have gone for a very long time that haven't necessarily delivered value very quickly. That's always a challenge. So Tim, if you will advance to the last slide, that'll allow us to kind of close out today. So the next full-fledged technical webinar is on the 18th. We're going to have our product team on here, which is going to be really good. Highly encourage you folks to join us. If you do want to connect with us, you have my email address, Tim's email address previously. You can go to our website, zapbi.com. You can find us in a variety of places on social media. And with that, very much want to thank Tim for all of the great insights that he provided today. Want to thank all of you for your participation, and stay tuned for the webinar recording. Thank you so much. Have a great day.